As you're doing that, I am Rachel, Director of Professional Learning International. For those of you who haven't joined us before, we have a masterclass. Excuse me, we have a masterclass every month um, on different topics related to concept-based inquiry. And this month we have Nyssa Brown, who is arts specialist, joining us to share what concept-based curriculum looks like in the arts. And Nyssa has done masterclasses for us before. She's also been an art institute specialist, so she's very, very experienced in this area. And Nyssa leads our um, concept-based arts course. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Ah, fantastic. We've got people from all over, from Helsinki, from Bucharest, arts teacher, from Brazil. Arthur, I started my international teaching career in Brazil, in Porto Alegre. Arts from Romania, Norway, Colombia, Sao Paulo, a couple from Brazil. Fantastic. Helsinki, Namibia, Italy, Jordan, Australia. Must be early for you in Australia. Welcome, Jason. Ukraine, Qatar. Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm going to hand over to Nyssa, who will get us started.
Awesome. It's so good to see you all. Thank you for whatever you have arranged in your life to be able to be here. Whether that means you got your kids to bed, success, and we're able to be here, or on the other side of the globe in the US, lots of folks are celebrating Thanksgiving. So maybe you're making time and space for this here. So anything in between. So thanks for whatever you busy people have done to make yourselves available for this. I'm really excited to share this masterclass with you. So we are going to jump into sharing some slides. I've got some ideas for you today on what actually got me really excited, to be honest with you, about concept-based learning and inquiry in an arts classroom. And I'm so excited to share it with you today. Can I ask for one other thing? For those of you who didn't share what you teach in the chat, would you be willing to do that? And I'm asking because I have dance examples and media arts examples, but if we don't have dance or media arts teachers on the call, then I might be less inclined to prioritize time for them. So some of you have said I'm visual arts, I'm music, that's wonderful. Can you just, if you haven't said what you teach, will you just throw that in the chat so that I can gauge the priority of what we have time for? Okay, I figured there's got to be at least a drama teacher on here on the call, theater teacher, amazing. Performing arts broadly, okay, awesome. PYP music. Hi, Kim.
Do we have anyone who's a coordinator who's supporting arts teachers? Also, let us know.
Yeah, I saw PYP coordinator. Somebody said PYP coordinator.
I am Dennis. Oh, nice to see you, Dennis. We just met you at the conference.
Yeah, Sophie, PYP coordinator. Okay, performing arts. Spanish. Oh, awesome. Okay, yep. Head of the arts department. Awesome. Curriculum coordinator. Oh, wonderful. I love it when we have learning leaders learning about arts. So thank you so much. If you are a learning leader of any sort, thank you for prioritizing this as well. Head of creative arts and integrating with visual arts. A homeroom teacher. Oh, how wonderful. Saswati, thank you so much for being here. Assistant right now. Oh, wonderful. Okay, we've got fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share slides. We'll jump in from there. Thank you so much for letting me know who you are, what you're interested in, what you teach, because if we have to prioritize time stuff, it really will help me. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right. Rachel, I'm just going to do a quick check. If I go into full screen mode, are we good?
Yep, that's great. Looks good.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna here's how we're gonna do this. I'm gonna present some stuff, and then I'm gonna ask you to throw some stuff in the chat so we can get some interaction. You can have some reflection and application along the way. So just be ready for that as well. And I'm going to go ahead and open my chat so that if people have questions along the way, hopefully I can see them. Rachel, if I miss something, please feel free to just jump in if it's something that we should clarify along the way. Otherwise, we do have a Q&A at the end, so we can absolutely catch questions that are best asked there at the end as well. All right. Are we good to jump in, Rachel?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
Fantastic.
awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to start out by saying some of my objections to inquiry, the way that I saw it being taught. When I was a music teacher, I now am a full-time consultant with arts educators and learning leaders, but I was in the classroom for 18 years, pre-K through grad school. And one of the things that I found really challenging was that I felt like inquiry was a lot of talking. And so, what I would love to share today is some models of how inquiry can be really thoughtful, meaning making, thinking, but it can also be done really actively through our arts disciplines and really bringing to life the reflection and the intentionality behind our disciplines. So that is where this title came from, active inquiry learning in the arts. And it really is about engagement. It's about engaging kids in the thinking and the doing parts of their art making. Now, when I say art making, I'm using art broadly. I'm using art to include dance, media arts, music, theater, drama, visual arts, and any of the integration work that you're doing. Whatever art making means for you, that's what I mean when I say art. I don't just mean visual art. All right. So that's why I care about this, because for me, this is how I saw my students not go from just doing to understanding why and how they do what they do and really owning it. It's really, really exciting. So I said briefly, I have the privilege of consulting with teachers and schools on 6 different continents. As Rachel mentioned, I'm an Erickson and Lanning concept-based curriculum and instruction certified trainer. Have learned so much from Rachel. I'm so grateful for her collaboration, as well as the whole team. If this is your first time, this is a really special community. If you don't know this community, this is a really, really special place to hang out. And I've been involved for years and have no desire to go anywhere. It's a really, really lovely place. For those of you who teach in U.S. context or American curriculum context, I help to write the National Core Art Standards. So if you have any questions about how that fits in with this, we can talk about that as well. And then I have taught in both American curriculum contexts and then also concept-based, including IB. I've taught MYP and DP music, as well as MYP design tech. So that's a little bit about me. So I say that because maybe that helps you know where I'm coming from and helps us connect on questions that you want to ask or things that you want to explore along the way. Quick copyright reminder, please refrain from taking screenshots or recordings, and please only take notes or recordings for your own personal use in your own classroom. Okay, so I think we've done this already, but if anybody is just joining us, would you go ahead and share in the chat? We can see your name already when you comment, but what school you're at, where you are in the world, and then what you teach or what your role is. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, we would love to know in the chat. And as an opening question, a guiding question today, how can inquiry fuel active arts making in arts classrooms? So not how can it just go along with it, but how can it actually be a catalyst? How can it be a driver for the art making we want our students to do? How could it help it move it along in the way that we most want? So I'd love for us just to consider that question. And here are some objections to inquiry that I hear from folks. And this is going to be one of those, I'll tell you what I think, but then I would really love to hear if you have any other ones, whether it's your objection or it's an objection that you've heard from someone else, and you don't have to claim which one it is. So think along the way, see if you've got anything to add. So some of the objections to inquiry in arts classrooms that I hear most when I work with folks, work with teachers, arts teachers, is first of all, it's too much talking. I don't want to talk all the time in my arts classes. And I agree with that. I don't want us to talk all the time in arts classes either. That if we're talking so much, we don't have enough time to actually make art, right? The creating or the performing parts of our disciplines or producing parts of our disciplines. And the first 2 bullet points kind of go together. Some people will say, hey, we're all about skills. The inquiry stuff, I mean, it's secondary because we're really about skills. And we're not going to talk a ton about that today, but for me, the skills are the foundation of our discipline, but they're not the finish line, right? We want more for kids than sitting up straight or using different types of voices or practicing facial expressions. Those are all skills, but that's not why we do what we do. We do what we do because we care about the impact, the meaning, the intentionality, the community, the collaboration, right? And all of those are about more than skills. A lot of times people will say, Nyssa, I love the idea of inquiry. It's fantastic. Really, really love it. But you know what? I have performances and exhibitions or art shows to prepare for, and I don't see my kids enough time. It's legitimate, right? Like that's a concern. We do have performances and exhibitions, but what if the way that we guide inquiry actually made those performances better and actually allowed us to have the learning results we wanted by the time we got to the performance or the exhibition? What if those two things could go together? And I'm going to argue that they are, that they can go together based on our examples today. And then this idea of, I just don't see my kids enough time. Now, if you see your kids 30 minutes a week and you're an elementary music teacher, you're going to have to prioritize really, really carefully how you do it. But it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. It can be a sometimes thing. It can be a in small chunks thing. And we can talk about that more at the end as well. Okay, hopefully I've given you enough time. Any other objections that you think or that you objections you have to inquiry or that you've heard other people say? Would you throw them in the chat? And again, you don't have to claim if it's yours or someone else's. Language barriers. Yes. Expectations of the kids, meaning some people don't have that expectation that they can do it. Is that right, Matthias or Matthias? I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong.
Can I respond like by talking?
Sure.
No, it's more like the kids, they come to the class and they want to do art. So they want to create and they want to draw, they want to paint.
Yep.
And they are the one who's saying like too much talking. So that's why I was saying about expectation from the part of the kids.
Wonderful. I love that. Yes. And so the kids, when the kids come to our classes, they want to do art, whatever the doing is, right? Fantastic. Love that. Okay, so misunderstanding that inquiry is not planned and it's free choice. Yeah, sometimes we have this like sort of what I call sort of a peace, love, and understanding approach to inquiry, which is sort of like everybody does whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it, which, you know, if we see one of the things I love about Rachel and Carla Marshall's book, Concept-Based Inquiry in Action, is they have this continuum of what inquiry can be, from very, very structured to very open inquiry. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out and look at that continuum, because it's really, really helpful. The examples I'm going to provide to you today are actually on the structured side. They're very much on the teacher guided. I'm controlling a lot of the learning, but I'm asking them to do the thinking, right? And then we can sort of move that over to more and more free choice. But yeah, especially when we see kids for 30 minutes a week or maybe 45 minutes a week, at least in the elementary school, free choice, they need a lot of structure. They don't even know what their choices are, right? They don't even know the elements of the art form are sometimes. What choices? They can't make on purpose choices when they don't know what their choices are, right? So we need to figure out how to structure that. Love it. Making students come up with their inquiry questions, which is now the base in the DP guide. Yeah. I'm really glad that you said that. I'm not sure if it's Anna or Anna, because this is where I think that structured inquiry approach, when we approach it from the perspective of helping kids think about what are helpful questions, and we learn also we learn what helpful questions are and how to coach their thinking through a more structured approach to start with, so that they can then take over some of that question asking along the way. Yeah, love it. Where can I find this continuum? Rachel, I hope you don't mind. Here we go. This is the book. It's in the first chapter, I think, isn't it? Yeah. Yep. So concept-based inquiry in action. That's where you can find the continuum. I just so happen to have it. All right. Yeah. When they focus on thinking, not copying, they learn like real artists. Yeah. My opinion is too high for the PYP. Yeah. So I think in terms of PYP, I think there's a difference sometimes in the amount of time that they spend, or this is in general, the amount of time that they spend in an arts classroom, the number of minutes they spend in an arts discipline versus the number of minutes they spend in other content areas, and thinking about how that impacts thinking and the types of questions that they ask. I think that's really, really worth considering too. Rachel, I saw you unmute. Did you want to say something? Sorry if I just talked over you.
No, you're good. I'm just looking for the diagram so I can add it to the chat.
Oh, perfect. Oh, I love that. Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so thank you for contributing to the objections. That sounds negative, but I mean it in a positive way. To help us kind of get a big picture of what are some of the barriers, what are some of the things that can feel like they stand in our way, and how can we navigate those? Because if we don't acknowledge them, it's really difficult to know what we're navigating. So here's what I would love. I'd love for us to consider moving from this idea that inquiry is straight up skills, or that arts disciplines have to be straight up skills, and that inquiry has to be responding to other people's art forms or responding to other people's artwork. There's nothing wrong with either of these things. Let me just be really, really clear. We are a skills-based discipline. We can't get away from the skills, and we shouldn't try. It's a foundation. And there's nothing wrong with responding to other people's artwork. So as a music teacher, let's say I'm conducting a choir, I might want my choir to listen to another choir sing the same piece of music that we're singing, responding to other people's artwork. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. That's a wonderful activity. And if we want them to be as active as possible, not just active thinkers, but active, reflective, and meaning-making artists, if we can help them use inquiry in relationship to their creating, performing, producing, then we're really helping them perform, think, perform, think, perform, think. So we get this really reflective cycle along the way, which is more active in terms of their music making or art making than only responding to other people's, right? I'm not saying don't do this. I'm just saying the option here is what we're going to talk about today, keeping it as active, create, perform, focused as possible. All right, we're going to talk about how to do that. And we're going to use all the skills along the way, right? The skills are going to be there. The analysis skills are there. The reflection skills are there. The singing skills are there. The part work skills are there. The painting skills are there. The improvisation skills are there. The devising skills are there. It's all there. It's a matter of how we're asking them to think as they're using those skills. All right, so let's jump on in. I'd love to introduce this idea of external versus internal case studies. So this goes back to the responding to, and the creating, performing. So an external case study, one way to think about it would be that students are responding to work, a piece of art, a song, a set design, a choreographic phrase that was created or performed outside your classroom. Think of it like a video or an audio or something outside of what your students create. Again, very worthwhile. I'm not saying don't do this. An internal case study would be something where students are reflecting and refining the work that they are creating inside the classroom. So this is their painting, their choreographed phrase, their tableau, their improvisation, their animation short. So they're looking at their own work and possibly their partner's work or other students' work inside the classroom as well. So this is stuff that's generated inside your classroom, artwork that's generated inside your classroom, and external case studies are could be artwork that's generated outside your classroom. It is worthwhile to look at both. We're going to focus on internal case studies today to keep the arts learning as active as possible. All right. Okay, so I've got some examples from all 5 areas. So I'm going to go even though I didn't see that we have a dance person, I'm going to go ahead and do it because theater people, we often do musical theater stuff and we put them together, right? So I'm just going to stick with it. So internal case study examples for dance could be a dance solo, could be a movement phrase. It could be a group dance shape or final pose. It could be a combo of choreographic devices, combination, and it could be a group performance. All of these things are things that students would have created or performed in your classroom. Examples of internal case studies for media arts could be an example of a camera angle or multiple camera angles when students are playing with the idea of perspective and angles, camera angles. It could be a video clip. It could be a short film students are working on, could be a photograph, could be an animation short, anything that the students have created, performed, in this case, produced, whatever they have created or produced basically in media arts. Stuff the students have done in your classroom. In music, it could be as simple as a musical phrase, 8-beat pattern, could be a solo performance of some kind. It could be a section performance. So the flute section could go off into its own room and focus on its own performance of a repertoire. It could be a short improvisation or a composition. So basically anything, any music that students would create or perform inside your classroom. Internal case studies for theater. I mentioned tableau before. It could be facial expressions that students are working on. It could be a scene, so the performance of a scene or part of a scene. It could be something that they've devised. And when I say performance, I don't even mean a formal performance. It could just be whatever they're working on, right? Whatever state their devising is in. Or thinking about the non-acting parts of theater, the more production side, it could be a set design. It could be stage design, lighting design, a sound design, a plan, a sample, something that they could reflect on. But it's something that they have created or performed inside the classroom. And then from a visual arts standpoint, again, what students have created, or in visual arts, it's less performing, it's more presentation, right? Something that they would present. So it could be a sketch that they're working on, could be an iteration, it could be multiple sketches, the evolution of 3 sketches maybe. It could be a final work of art. It could be the artist statement. It could be their presentation of the artist statement, how they actually present it, if that's important. It could be a collection of their work, whatever that would be, thinking about like a DP portfolio, something like that. And it could be the ideation of an idea, like a sketch, like 3 iterations of a sketch. But the short version is that they are creating or presenting. It's work. We're looking at the work that they have created or presented inside their classroom. All right. Of these things, just to give you a chance to say what makes the most sense to you, would you write 2 or 3 things in the chat that you think would be your kind of go-tos in your discipline? What would be your go-to internal case studies? They can be what I have, or they could be something else. So this is your chance to either claim what works for you or share some more ideas. What are your go-to internal case studies that you would want students to reflect on, their own creation, performance, presentation, or production? 2 or 3 things in the chat. All right, a skit, amazing. Sketches, ideation, yes. Collections of work, fantastic. Great. So we've got the production parts of theater and the acting parts. Ooh, the process planning to creating. I like that. Yeah. Mime. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yes. So art making in progress and then resolved or more final products. Group performance with instruments. Yeah, this idea of presenting mistakes and how they turned it into a masterpiece, right? So it's like this idea of really honoring that the artistic process. It's not just about that product, right? But we, as artists, we really value this artistic process piece. Great. Sketch ideas. Yeah, music technology and production. Thank you for mentioning that, Dennis. The final masterpiece and the process to achieve it. Love it. Amazing. So from a concept-based standpoint, as I'm reading through all of these, I'm finding all the concepts, right? So we've got rehearsal process, ensemble, artwork, process, music technology, production, sketches, ideations. All of those are concepts that can then go into our planning. Yeah, that the whole having a concept-based mindset, you just start to see concepts, right? Like concepts pop out at you. All right, so let's get really specific about what this could look like. I didn't see dance, so I'm actually going to skip over that when we can come back if we want to. But I am going to go ahead and just pop over to media arts because I know many visual arts teachers also teach some kind of media. All right, so usually, caveat, when I think about creating an enduring or a conceptual understanding, I usually have a grade level in mind. So I will think grade 7, or I will think DP1, whatever it is. I can imagine the kids sitting in front of me, and I absolutely encourage you to do that. When we're talking about arts, there's very rarely, and gosh, I hope this is not true at your school, but there is very rarely can we count on consistent amounts of art experience throughout their secondary journey. Right? So when I say middle school and high school here, I'm not exactly sure how much media arts experience students would have. So when you read this, I would love it if you would look at it as a visual or media arts teacher and say, my 8th graders would do that. Or my MYP4 kids would do that. Right? So see if you can situate it, because it's really hard to say sometimes. I don't know your school and how much experience your kids have. So I recommend selecting a grade level, but that's why I haven't done that here. Okay, so if we have, let's say, we have the enduring or conceptual understanding. Media artists tell stories by focusing attention, using the rule of thirds, sequencing images, and leading a viewer's eye through still or moving pictures. And what we're trying to get kids to answer is, how can media artists tell stories in their work? That's the conceptual question. And what I want is, if I ask kids by the end of this inquiry, the end of asking these questions, if I ask them this question, I'm hoping they're going to give me something in the universe of this. Doesn't have to be perfect, but this is where I'm designing this from. And I want to ask them these questions about something, back to internal case studies, something they've created or performed in the classroom. It's their work they're inquiring about. So for instance, in this case, it would be students' own still and moving picture work. Up to you what that work would be. So as I'm looking at this enduring understanding, or this conceptual understanding, or generalization, as we say in concept-based, the generalization, the conceptual understanding is, we want to start with concept formation questions. So we want to look at these. I've bolded most of the concepts over here. And through this bolding, I want to ask myself, what questions would kids not necessarily, what concepts would they not know? And when I say what concepts would they not know, well, then I want to ask them a question to help them understand what that individual concept is. So for instance, maybe students might not be as familiar with what a sequence of images are. So what is it, or what are, maybe even better, what are examples of sequences of images? So that they start to understand, what is that concept, a sequence of image, or a sequence along the way. So they start to see the evolution of the frames. And then, for instance, what is the rule of thirds? What does that mean? Or what are examples and non-examples of the rule of thirds? This is what it looks like. This is what it doesn't look like. how can we understand what the rule of thirds is? What's the definition of the rule of thirds? So once they have these, then we can start to say, okay, now I want you to look at your own still and moving picture work. And I want you to tell us, student who now has created something, where did you focus the attention in this work? And how did you do that? What was your process for doing that? Could also ask how well it worked and what would you change potentially? And how did you use the rule of thirds? So I'm looking over here, I've got this concept of attention. And so I want to ask a question about how they focused attention. And then the rule of thirds is another concept. So I want to ask them, how did you use the rule of thirds? And then here, where are you guiding the viewer's eye to go? First, second, third in this work, which is really about sequencing images. So I'm asking them a question. Look at your own work. This still and moving picture work, moving pictures, I guess if it's going to be a sequence of images, what did you do? Where are you trying to guide the viewer's eye? And how did you lead the viewer's eye through the work? So at this point, they could just be reflecting on their own work. They could also be looking at someone else's work, right? So it could be a partner situation. You're giving your partner feedback, they're giving you feedback. Or you could be self-reflecting. Or you could have a group working together and they all created still and moving picture work, whatever you decide, and they're all going to reflect together on that. The result of these things can lead them to refine their own creation and performance, in this case, creation or production. And in the end, we're going to want to ask them to summarize their learning. So this was about one part of their work. This was about another part of their work. This was about another part of their work. But in the end, we want them to actually have to see the pattern across these, across what they're learning. So for instance, if I'm reflecting on my own work, I might look at somebody else's work. Maybe I look at a third person's work. I'm going to want to summarize what I learned about how media artists can tell stories in their work. And the answer to this question, hopefully, will take me back to this generalization or conceptual understanding. So through this sequence of questions, which is very intentionally designed from this conceptual understanding or this generalization, the whole time students are they're kind of naturally bought in because they're working on their work. They're reflecting on the effectiveness of their own work along the way. All right. Oh, dance is here too. Thank you for telling me. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to go back. I missed those at the beginning. Dance. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, so another conceptual understanding or generalization. In this case, the generalization is dancers increase ensemble unity. So I'm trying to get kids to dance together by synchronizing their movements based on space, time, or rhythm, whatever you'd want to go with, and energy. And what are they going to be looking at? The case study is going to be looking at their own work, their own ensemble performances, because I want ensemble unity, right? So it's got to be at least a few people, some kind of ensemble. And we could be looking at something really short. It could just be a phrase, a dance phrase. It doesn't have to be an entire, 8-minute piece. It could just be a dance phrase, or maybe some of their own choreography. Or it could be your choreography that they're reflecting on how well they're performing with unity, right? So we're going to take them through this understanding with these questions, but they're focusing on their own performance the whole time. So concept formation questions could be, what are the definitions of space, time, and energy? By the time you get to this, they may already know that. You might not need to define that, but they would need to know that in order to be able to reflect on it. Factual questions, we would ask them, and this is where I'm going back to here. I want to ask them about ensemble unity, and I want to ask them about movements, and I want to ask them about space, time, and energy. So the questions that I am asking here are taking them back to this while focusing on their own performance. So they hopefully have the buy-in of wanting to be good, wanting to do a good job. And these questions can help take them there. So how synchronized were our ensemble movements? Sometimes I'll say on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is not at all together and 5 is we are professionals. How good were we? How synchronized were our movements? Oh, we were a 3. Well, what makes you say that? Why did you say you were a 3? What about what you did was a 3? And then we can start to direct them specifically to space and relationship to ensemble unity. How did our use of space add to or distract from our ensemble unity? And how could we use space to be more unified, to create more unity? So now we're not just looking at what we did, but we're asking ourselves, how could we make it better? Great, let's try it. So I'm going to lean into a different part of this than I did in the media arts example. Here's my formula. When we want kids to be actively making art, let them do something, then ask them a question about it, and then have them do it again with more consciousness or more intentionality. Then ask them another question, figure out what they can do better, and then have them perform it again. Then ask them to reflect on something else, like time and ensemble unity. And then ask them to do it again. So if you look at how many times they're doing this performance, they're going to perform here and ask a question. They're going to perform here, second performance, and ask a question. They're going to perform here and ask a question. They're going to perform here and ask a question. And then you'll probably have them do the performance again. By the time they get through just the factual questions, the questions about their own performance, they've actually rehearsed 5 times. Or they've done 5 small iterations to their media or visual arts work. And what that allows them to do is practice the skills that a lot of people say, well, we have to practice skills. Yeah, you just did it 5 times with 30 seconds of conversation in between. So each time they repeat it, they're hopefully actually improving their skills and doing it better because they're conscious of it. So this is how we can toggle between create, perform, ask a question. Create, perform better because we just asked the question. Ask another question. Create, perform better because we just asked a question, right? So the two actually can end up being quite synergistic of the doing of the art and the questions along the way. Okay, I'm just going to do a really quick look in the chat. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so let's go on to a music example. So music example, this is really about balancing or blending sound, and it happens to be, it could be either voice or instrument. And it looks like I've raised a hand. That was really interesting. Is this this must be like yeah, exactly. You can unraise my hand, Rachel, if you want to. Anyways, okay, so performers balance and blend their ensemble sound by, and now I'm going to give 3 strategies. So here's how we can create balance and blend. Ensemble people, you know what I'm talking about. First of all, you have to know what voice or instrument part is most important. You have to know its role, right? If you have the melody, usually we want to hear you more. Second, we want to be listening to other people. So we need to know who's most important and we need to listen to others. And then the third thing is I need to adjust my sound to match who's most important according and while I'm listening to other people. As a conductor, I did a lot of this. Sopranos, sing louder, you have the melody. Altos, shh, right? But it was me doing that. I was telling them what to do, right? And there's nothing wrong with conducting, but at the same time, if they can do this themselves, they own the learning. And I also have to work less hard. That's also good too. But mostly that they own the learning. So if we think that's a little tip for you, I always say, what are you sick of saying from the front of the classroom? That might be worth being a generalization. That might be worth being a conceptual understanding. Whatever you want them to take more responsibility for, do that. Have them do that. So the example here would be any repertoire. So like the band repertoire that you're doing, the choir repertoire that you're doing, the song that you're doing in, this is a middle school, high school example, but it could be a 4th or 5th grade round, the round that you're singing in music class. And then we want to ask any of these bolded concepts here, make sure they know what they are. What is balance? What are examples of balance and non-examples of balance? Same thing with blend. They don't know what those things are. They can't really answer questions about them. And then we say, all right, let's play it through once. We're going to play measure 10 to 20. Let's go. And then it's as good as it is, or as much of a train wreck as it is what it is. And then we say, okay, which voice part or instruments are featured in this section of music? So I'm going back to this first strategy here. Who's most important and who's supporting? So now I'm making them take responsibility for who should be loudest, basically. And then ask them to play it again. So now that you know that the flutes have the melody, let's play it again. See if it changes anything. What did you notice? Did it change anything? Who are you listening to in this section of music as you balance? Saxophones, who are you listening to? Drums, who are you listening to? Percussion never listens to anybody, so we won't worry about that, but we'll ask anyways. How did you adjust your sound better to balance? And why did you make that choice? So again, each time in between each of these bullet points, we're going to go back and play. We're going to go back and do the art. But at the same time, we want them to be conscious each time. It's not just do it again, do it again, do it again. It's do it with more understanding of why we're doing what we're doing or how we're doing what we're doing. And then at the end, we come to the question, hopefully, fingers crossed, if I ask them, how can performers balance and blend their ensemble sound? Hopefully, it's going to go back to this generalization or something in that realm. But again, the entire time, the kids are playing their horns the entire time. They're singing the entire time. They're playing their stringed instruments the entire time. We're just sneaking really well-placed questions that bring, hopefully, conscious learning to the fore. All right, we've got theater and then visual arts, and then I'm going to ask you the same question that I did before. Which of these things stand out to you as things that you would most like to try or implement? So that's your reflection question while you're listening, especially in case we've already done your art example, you can be thinking about that. Okay, so for theater, this is really about communication. So I have 5 different art areas. I'm really trying to have very different kinds of generalizations or conceptual understandings. So this one is really about how artists communicate. So even if you're not a theater person, you might be like, well, I still want dancers have to communicate too. So you could, if you put dancers at the beginning, you could pretty much do the same thing. You would just put elements of dance instead of theater. So a lot of these can translate too. So just because it's not your art area, you could probably easily apply them to your own area, many of them. So the conceptual understanding, theater artists communicate their ideas to an audience by clarifying their artistic intention. That's the first thing they have to do if they want to communicate. The second thing is they need to experiment with the elements of theater. What are my choices? And then they're going to intentionally put together some of those elements of theater to best communicate what they want to say. Now, these 3 strategies I made up. You might look at those and be like, those are not the most important things to me. Great. Fill in the 3 things that are most important to you. This was just what made sense to me. So you can adjust any of these to work for your own students too. And then what do we want students paying attention to? What are they reflecting on? They're going to reflect on their own performances. So it could be, they could be reflecting on how they're communicating their characters, how they're communicating the scenes that they're working on, how they're communicating through their devising, through their physical theater choices. It could be anything. But the important thing is that it's their own performances or their own creations. Now, when we go over here, we need to make sure that they know what the elements of theater are. If it says elements of theater here, I am assuming that they actually know what those are, because if not, I would really need to spell them out more. But in middle school or high school, maybe, depending on how much experience they've had, they might know what those are. But they have to know what the elements of theater choices are, or they can't combine them on purpose. And then once they know what those are, then we could say to them, okay, listen, you're in groups of 4 today, and you're going to be devising. What are you trying to communicate with your audience? What's the meaning? And then, what is your artistic intention for the piece or work, similar to what you want to communicate? And then say, great, experiment with the elements of theater in order to communicate that. Choose one element of theater and experiment. Choose a second element of theater and experiment. Choose a third element of theater and experiment. So in between bullet points, they're doing the art. They're creating or they're performing. And then ask them, well, what elements of theater did you experiment with? And how effective was that theater element in communicating your artistic intention? Again, if you want to do 1 to 5, 1 didn't work at all. 5, we're keeping that one. That was bang on, right? And then say, great, now put together the most effective ones. Play with putting together the ones that worked best and let them try it, create or perform in between bullet points. And then, which elements of theater did you combine, or do you want to combine in order to best communicate that intention with the audience? And why did you choose those? And then have them do it again. And maybe you have them do it 3 or 4 times, even different combinations until they find the right ones. But not only then have they made choices, but they've made choices on purpose, right? I chose facial expressions because it did this, or we put these 3 things together because it was strongest because of X, Y, and Z. So they're not just making choices, but they're doing it on purpose. They're doing it with intention. And then at the end, we want to ask them something like, how can theater artists, communicate their ideas to an audience? And then hopefully if we ask that conceptual question, it would take them back to this, and they would have done it all through their own work. All right, one more. This is very intentionally an elementary example. Oftentimes we don't have media arts, dance, or theater at the elementary level. So I did secondary examples of those, but I wanted to make sure to have one elementary example here as well. So I'm thinking grade 2 to 3, depends on how much time you see your students. For visual arts, something like visual artists can share their identities through images, colors, and symbols. And we'd be looking at students' own artwork. Medium doesn't matter. You get to decide, or they get to decide, or they have some choices, right? It's not about the medium. It's about what they're expressing regardless of medium. And then we'd have to know, what's the definition of identity? So now I'm going back over here and I'm seeing, gosh, what concepts would they need to make sure they understand before we start asking them questions about their artwork? So what's the definition of identities, or what are examples of identities we could reflect in our artwork? And then what are examples of images, colors, and symbols? Again, they might know these things, but they might need some ideas too. And then if we say to them, okay, we're going to do a little planning to start with. So you can use these questions as like planning. You could use it as along the way process reflection, or you could also use the questions at the end to look backwards. But I would definitely use them along the way at least also, because otherwise you're not getting the main benefit of them. There are some questions that you can ask as a reflection, but these are going to be really helpful to help them make choices on purpose. So use them along the way, not just at the end. So what do you want to share about your identity? Let them say, right? I want to share where my family is from. I want to share what language I speak. I want to share that I love cats, whatever it is, right? And then what images will you use to share your identity? And how do those images represent your identity? So we're asking them to be really on purpose about the images that they're choosing and be able to explain to us why that matches what they want to communicate about their identity. The same thing about colors. What colors would you like to use and why? And maybe they try some things out. Maybe you say, well, try 3 colors and see which ones feel like they match your identity best and why. So you can do the iteration along the way. And then at the end, say, well, which colors will you choose for your final? We were just doing some iterations, some sketches here. What do you want to choose? So we can do the exploration and the reflection along the way. So the choices that they're making are really conscious by the time they get to their final work. And then same thing with symbols. What symbols will you use to share your identity, and how do those match your identity? And then at the end, we would want to ask some kind of how can visual artists share their identities, and visual artists can share their identities through images, colors, and symbols. Lots of these I've given you, we've kind of gone through like one iteration of it. But really, in order for students to truly generalize, they need multiple examples. So it's not just about me going through this process, but it's about me looking at my elbow partner's work and asking those questions too. What images did you use, partner, to share your identity, and how do those reflect your identity? Maybe they then turn to the person on the other side of them and ask that question as well. So these can guide the artwork, but we really want to have more than just our own ideas necessarily. We might also want to have iterations of our own work, and maybe also look at other people's in the class as well. Because in order to generalize, we need to have more than one example in our minds. Otherwise, we really don't have that much to summarize. And we get all kinds of ideas from other people or from iterations of our own work, which would be another way to get multiple examples as well. So Rachel mentioned at the beginning that we're going to let you know about another opportunity. If you are interested in learning how to create these conceptual understandings or refining your ability to do that, create these conceptual understandings, create these really, really precise and intentional guiding questions, consider what types of work students are going to be reflecting on. Lauren and I are going to be, sorry, there we go. This is Lauren Ziegler. We are going to be running a Discovering Concept-Based Arts course. It's a 6-module course. We're beginning at the end of January. And it is a really wonderful container to really deepen our own work and our own practice with other arts educators. It's all arts educators. Lauren is a theater teacher, very experienced, lots of different ages. And we will be taking turns facilitating calls. And there's also asynchronous content through the PLI portal. And we will debrief that then on the calls as well. So you have both synchronous and asynchronous options. So we'll take some Q&A in just a second. Rachel, do you want to add anything from a logistical standpoint about the course?
Only that the early bird is available for the next 2 days. So if you are really interested in considering it, do make sure you get your application in for PD quickly, because the early bird pricing ends on this Friday.
Okay, great. I'm going to take a quick spin through the chat, but if you have a question, would you throw it in the chat?
So there's a couple of comments in the chat, which I think would be worth sort of flipping into a little bit of a question.
Mm-hmm.
So Mandy was saying, if we give students too much art theory, it can take away from natural artistic instinct. Students need space to explore, to play, to express themselves freely. At the same time, they also benefit from learning simple skills and concepts. For me, the key is a balance, teaching enough technique to empower them while still protecting their creativity, voice, and individuality. And then further down, she's also made a second comment in terms of, if we need to use questions thoughtfully, too many interruptions can break students' creative flow. A well-chosen prompt supports inquiry without pulling them out of their process. Do you want to kind of comment to that, to finding that that balance and making sure that we I think there's a risk that if we don't give them enough, then students aren't actually building skills and techniques. I've certainly seen my own children in 2 different school contexts, and one was more kind of focused on building skills and strategies. And I found that they were really proud of the artwork that they had built in that context, and would come home and literally ask me to go and buy a frame for their artwork. And in a context where it's very free and open,
great,
I don't even always see the artwork. Like they just don't have the same pride in it, because it's the kind of artwork that they could do at home at the dining room table. So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was that I've always valued but didn't know how to get at, Mandy, and I think this is kind of what this is the crux of what you're you're addressing. I really want students to own their own learning, right? I really want them to be responsive, be thinkers. I want them to make meaning. I don't want to have to interpret for them. I don't want to make meaning for them. I want them to own those choices, and I want them to own the options. And what I did for the first part of my career, because it was what I was taught to do, is just a lot of skills. That sounds so judgmental, but it was a lot of skills. We did a lot of skill building, but the thing was, the kids didn't know when, why, or how to apply the skills that they had. So the fact that they had all of these skills was only worth so much to them because they didn't really own what to do with them or when to use them, the application part, right? And so I think if we build, here's my sense, if we can get really clear. So let's say we have a unit, and within that unit we have, and it depends on how much time you see your students, you got 30 minutes a week, and you've got 10 weeks, you might have 2 to 3 understandings, conceptual understandings in a unit, right? Like it depends. You've got more time with students, you might have 5 to 7, or maybe more in a DP context, right? So take the numbers with a grain of salt, depending on how much time you have. But let's go with an average of 4 understandings in a unit. Probably more appropriate for middle school than elementary, usually, given how much time we see students. Those 4 understandings should be, and I don't use the word should very often, should reflect the most important takeaways. So if we are going to if we're going to take our time to create an understanding, and then we're going to craft a series of guiding questions, first of all, that's a lot of time and energy on our part. So let's not create those things that we're not actually going to use. Let's make them actually the most important things. And then ask students those questions. The other thing I want to say is sometimes I think we get into thinking that the most important learning can't be reflected in understandings, and the things that we most want to ask questions about, we can't, because somehow they don't fit in understandings. So this idea of experimentation, right? Artists experiment, or artists increase their creativity through experimenting, such as, and then what different kinds of ways can they experiment? So this whole idea of like experimentation falling, because I hear this a lot from people, exploration, experimentation, creativity. Somehow people think that those fall outside of an understanding. If we include the most important concepts, we insist including the most important concepts in our understandings, then we're going to want to ask questions about them. So I think it's a little bit of an infinity sign, right? We need to figure out what matters most so that we can incorporate that into the learning, and those questions actually make the biggest difference. So we get that natural flow, and we're not actually breaking their flow because we're asking them the most important questions. Now, how we pace that's up to us as professionals. We know how old our students are. We know their concentration. We know how to help them stay in flow. But I think there's lots of pieces that can help us find that balance. And first and foremost, make sure that you're actually identifying the most important things, and don't lock yourself out of something because you think, oh, that can't be taught, that's artistic. I actually, there are very, very, very few things that I haven't been able to put into words with enough arduous thinking about it. So don't give up the most important things. I guess that's kind of the crux of it. And then pace it according to your kids. Rachel, do you want to add anything? Based on what you've seen, you've worked with tons of arts educators.
Well, actually, on the next one I do. So the next question is following on from the skills versus inquiry conversation. How does this look with assessment? Mm-hmm. And I'll leave you to speak to the assessment, but I really wanted to speak to this first part about skills versus inquiry, because I think actually what we're achieving with a concept-based model for arts education is the skills. It's not, we remove that skills versus inquiry, and actually the skills become the foundation for the inquiry. And so we actually raise the level of the importance of processes, strategies, and skills. So that's based on Dr. Lois Lanning's work around the foundation for these subject areas, and they become the focus of what we're inquiring into. And just as Nyssa says, we focus on what's most important. So each teacher is their own expert in what their students need. And as Nyssa said, in arts education, you will have some middle school students who have had, hopefully, several hours of arts a week through elementary, and then have a really rich experience to build on. But you'll also have some students in other schools who are coming to these arts subjects for the very first time in middle school. So you know the skills and strategies that your students need most in order to grow from that. So that's where I hope that we can move to, is moving away from skills or inquiry to actually it's both. And then Nyssa, do you want to add to that and talk about how that looks with assessment?
Yeah, let me go back to thinking about some of those concrete examples. So when we were asking students those questions, like those factual questions, where did you use the rule of thirds? How did that help you match your artistic intention? They can't answer that without skills. It's rich with skills, but the skills move towards a purpose, which is understanding how or why we use those skills or strategies or processes. So the skills required to do those the inquiry pieces that we looked at earlier, they're like overflowing. The skills are overflowing the inquiry cycle, right? Or the inquiry process. So they're like this, and as I said, skills are the foundation, not the finish line. They're the foundation, and they're the springboard. That's what allows students to do it. Now, to do the inquiry, I also understand that when students come to you and haven't had anything, you feel like I need to build the skills, but we don't actually have to build skills separate from conceptual understanding if our conceptual understandings are crafted to meet students where they're at. And that's where we need to be really just aware of where our kids are at. In terms of the assessment piece, this is a whole course in and of itself. But for the assessment piece, I think about, the skills along the way. And somebody asked something about scope and sequence here also. Scope and sequence means different things to different people, but I'm going to take a skills-based scope and sequence approach here and see if I can weave these together. If we're talking about a skills-based scope and sequence, meaning I am assessing the skills in the scope and sequence, those are sort of smaller chunks. They're smaller chunk assessments. More formative. I know formative and summative, they're problematic words, but they're smaller pieces. And usually I can see them by observation. I can see a kid drawing shapes. I can see a kid sitting up tall. I can hear a kid using different voice types in theater. I can watch a kid using different levels in dance. The skills are usually observable, right? We can usually see them or hear them doing it, and we can make an assessment based on that. However, when it comes to actual assessment of understanding, we need to know what they're thinking. And that's where those conceptual questions come in. How do theater artists communicate their artistic intention? In order to know what kids think, we need to know what they're thinking, right? We have to have them either tell it to us, write it down. We need to hear their thoughts. So assessment of understanding in that sense requires us to know what they're thinking. And then how that all comes together is the application. What choice did you make? What are you trying to communicate? Which theater elements did you use and why? Now we're using the skills and the understanding for that real life application or that transfer piece. And that requires the doing of the thing, the skills, but it also requires the understanding of why we're doing what we're doing or how we're doing what we're doing, which does involve thought. So how does it fit with assessment? It depends on what part of this assessment continuum you're talking about, but I hope that helps a little bit. Rachel, do you want to add anything?
I think really it comes back to being very clear and intentional about what you want your students to understand. And too often we go straight to the skills because that's what's in our scope and sequence. So we're focused on assessing those skills and what's in our scope and sequence. But if we can raise that to the level of an understanding, then we have an opportunity to assess it through those guiding questions. So you will have seen in Nyssa's presentation throughout, she shared the conceptual question that she would ask. And in each of those, that conceptual question is really a strong foundation for assessment. You ask that question and see how students respond.
And sometimes they give us better answers than we originally planned, which is always humbling.
Or different also. Like, so you were saying with one of them, you said, you know, I've made up these three things. It could be three different things for you. It will be for students too. They're likely to touch on some of the things that you have planned for because you've been focused on your questions around that, but you'll also see what else they see is really essential in that, and that can be really informative from an assessment perspective.
These are really great questions. Thank you so much. Thank you all for sticking around too. This is awesome. Any other questions, things that you're wondering, or follow-ups to what we've talked about?
No? All right, so I popped the link to the arts course into the chat. I'll just pop that in again in case anybody missed it. If you are interested, as I mentioned, the course, the early bird closes in a couple of days. I can't remember if you said this earlier, Nyssa, but that course does involve a series of video modules that you watch at your own pace, but it also includes live Zoom calls where you're interacting with both Nyssa and Lauren. And then at the end of the course, you have a one-on-one coaching call. And I think this is unique to some of the courses that we do at Professional Learning International, is that at the end of the course, as you've developed your unit, you have that opportunity for a one-on-one kind of sit down with the course creators to get feedback on your unit planner. There aren't very many other courses like that where you get that one-on-one time. So if you are interested in that, then just let us know. Shodi, yes, we can send you through the course outline. Just send us an email and I can get that through to you. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and huge thank you to you, Nyssa, for preparing today's masterclass. It's wonderful to be able to provide examples that are specific to the arts. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.